to give us more insight into the meeting between Anthony Albanese and US President Donald Trump, I'm joined by former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Sean, many of us here in Australia were expecting some kind of blow-up from this meeting, but it all seems to have gone very, very well.
Well, I'm glad you're not the only one. I was telling people to keep an eye on this meeting when I saw it come out on the schedule. Based on some of the Prime Minister's previous comments regarding President Trump, I wasn't sure how this thing was going to go, whether he was going to bring something up, whether President Trump would bring something up. But I think that your team there around the Prime Minister did a good job because he came and played it really well. I think maybe he had seen the Zelensky movie and didn't want a repeat of that. But I will say that it not only was a good diplomatically, because I share that concern. I was very wonder which prime minister was going to show up, the one that likes to talk about Donald Trump, or the one that understands what's good for both countries. And I think that it wasn't just a good meeting, but it was a great meeting. The deal that was had is going to benefit both countries, and not just our two countries, but I think put a good check against China and the threat that it poses the world at large.
Donald Trump was very complimentary of our Prime Minister, calling him a great Prime Minister, despite what we all know are major differences of ideology and policy on climate change, Palestine. How sincere is Trump when he praises Albanese as a friend and as a great leader? Is that genuine, or is that just something Trump does in order to smooth the path for negotiations and deals?
There's a saying in American baseball that you're only as good as your last at bat. And I believe that you're only as good as your last comment or meeting with Donald Trump when you're a foreign leader. And so this one went well. And I think that they got along well. They accomplished a great deal for our two countries. But you're only as good as your last meeting. So I think if the Prime Minister were to kind of go off cue, off script, start making some comments, that description of him from President Trump would change awful quickly.
Well, while our Prime Minister got through the meeting unscathed, our Ambassador Kevin Rudd, not quite so fortunate. Let me play the exchange for you.
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if he said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President.
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will.
Sean, what's that old expression? Many a truth is said in jest. Is that what's going on here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I've been part of those briefings. There's no question that President Trump was well aware of the previous Prime Minister and your current ambassador's comments about him. I think that while the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, that is, probably through this deal and through this AUKUS deal that we have on submarines and other defense sort of issues, probably can manage to salvage this relationship. I would argue that Ambassador Rudd, former Prime Minister Rudd, is probably not going to fare too well during his tenure here in Washington.
Well, our opposition leader has immediately called for Rudd to be sacked, saying his position is untenable. Here she was this morning.
It's a bit awkward, isn't it? It's taken nearly a year to get this meeting, and that's been a failure of the ambassador. And when the ambassador is the punchline of the joke and the Prime Minister is actually laughing at him, I think that tells us all we need to know about the fact that it's probably not reasonable that he continue in the role. To see the Prime Minister actually laughing at his own ambassador in the room when the President made a joke, I think it's untenable.
Sean, I take our opposition leader's point, but isn't the counter-argument that Rudd has been the ambassador this long? He helped to organise the meeting. The meeting went very well. There are a few words between himself and Trump, but it was kind of laughed off. He survived. He carries on.
Yeah, I think that would be the best interpretation of that exchange. But I agree with the opposition leader. Look, for a country as important as Australia, and I was there up close during the first term, I've praised your previous ambassador, Joe Hockey. I've talked about some of your previous prime ministers. They enjoyed a much closer relationship with the president. So as I said, the prime minister, I think, is clearly through this minerals deal, salvaging the relationship that exists. But when your job as ambassador is to be the representative of the government, and it's pretty clear that you have no relationship with the current administration, I would agree with the opposition leader, because it's not that you're just a joke, but you're patently ineffective. And if the rest of the administration, the rest of the Trump administration, saw that exchange, which they all did, to be honest with you, I mean, just to be clear, then your effectiveness in Washington, D.C. representing Australia is pretty minimal. I mean, look, you could stay, but it's pretty obvious that your only thing that you're known for in Washington, D.C. is hosting a tennis tournament with CNN.
And Kevin Rudd is quite famous for his ego. I can't imagine how he dealt with the entire room laughing at him. Let's move on from that. I want you to tell me about the No Kings protests across the US at the weekend. These were lefty protests against Donald Trump, accusing him of trying to make himself a king. Is that right?
Here's the funny thing about the No Kings rally and this threat to democracy. In Washington, they held the protest on the National Mall. And we in America are in the middle of a government shutdown, a shutdown that when Barack Obama was president, closed the National Mall. So this so-called king that they think is president right now allowed the National Mall to be open, to be used, so that people who wanted to exercise their First Amendment under our Constitution to express their displeasure with the current president that was duly elected, the so-called king, allowed them to have that happen. That would be a pretty bad thing for a king to do, that so-called undermines democracy. So again, the irony of how this all happened and what it meant to me is so lost on so many people in the left and the legacy media here in the States.
Some of it was just laughable. For instance, here's Nancy Pelosi ripping a paper crown in half. Have a look.
I'm going to tear up the crown.
But, Sean, some of it was just downright disturbing, I would say evil. Have a listen to this woman.
Okay, so for a birthday present, what do you hope happens? You know, you wake up tomorrow morning.
I hope that I see the obituary that we're all waiting for tomorrow. That's what I hope for.
Yeah. You wishing that President Trump is dead?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sean, I really do not understand these people at all. Do you look at your own country sometimes and think, what the hell?
Oh, absolutely. Like the idea that we've gone from having two sides that disagreed on policy to one side that calls. I mean, you think about it. This is what they're saying about President Trump. We've got a candidate for attorney general where I live in Virginia that openly bragged about wanting to shoot his political opponent and then watch the mother of his children have them suffer in her arms. And then you've got the candidate for Senate in Maine who made some unbelievably racist comments and then talked about how an AK-47 is sometimes the only way to solve problems. This is the current state of the Democratic Party. They don't like to admit it or talk about it, but at the end of the day, every time, I mean, let me just take you back if I can. When the election was occurring 4 years ago, the current incumbent governor of Virginia, a guy named Ralph Northam, got caught with blackface. And all the Democrats denounced him and said that he should step down as governor. So we've gone from a guy who wears blackface should step down as the governor of Virginia to a guy running for attorney general talking about putting bullets in the head of his political opponent, and a big collective yawn from the Democratic Party, including the head of the Democratic National Committee. The Democrats have spiraled downward in the last 4 or 5 years to a place that I never thought I'd see in this country.